So the idea is that we don't want to wait for illness or sickness to take hold. We want to get ourselves in a position that we either prevent whatever we have going on from getting worse or taking a truly proactive approach in maintaining our health.
Maher, how are you doing? Okay, the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat with you.
I am excited to for you being here. You have been recently vocalizing one of your what seems to be core tenant principles behind what you do, why you do it, which is health is not a privilege, but it's a right. Where is that coming from?
It's coming from a place of realizing that when you sit in a room with a doctor and they're speaking at you instead of with you or for you to educate you, that you feel almost coward in those moments, that you feel as though you're helpless and that there's nothing you can do within your own power to either change your circumstances or gain a better understanding of what's happening. And I happen to feel that way when I was younger, being in a health situation myself. And then coming now in a world where we have so much access to influencers and social media, and globalization is a great thing because it brought distance closer, but it also gave us access to things that what's right and what's wrong, or what works for me and what's working for other people thing. And we're so inundated with information that it's really hard to make discernment from what is the black from the white, and there's just a lot of gray area. And we're constantly being overwhelmed with this product or that product, and this is what you have to do, and this is what you need to be healthy, when we're making it way more complicated than it needs to be. So here we are being met with providers who don't treat us like equal. Then we're going and have no choice but to search outside of the system. So we're finding influencers, sites, or bloggers to help us navigate this health challenge or what have you. And now we're even left more confused than we were because there's just so much information out there. And so I feel like I have just been in a position to narrow that down and just make it more simple, because truthfully, that's really what health is. So we don't need to be buying all of these expensive products or going to millions of doctor's appointments to just figure out what it is that we need to do within ourselves when we truly do have the power.
There's so much truth to that. We are inundated with information, and back in the day, we used to think when internet becomes easily accessible, we will be so much better off because we'll be so educated, we'll know exactly what to do. But as the irony of life stands, with more information, I think we are less educated. We don't have the ability to understand what is right and what is not right. And all the choices is doing nothing but confusing and paralyzing us. So from your perspective, when you're advocating for the patient, when you're preparing them for a healthy life, what are some steps that you are helping them take that is missing from conventional practice, where people just go to the hospital and it's more of a sick care than a health care?
Yeah, medicine has become very reactive. And in my position as a naturopath doctor, we sit in a more proactive approach. So the idea is that we don't want to wait for illness or sickness to take hold. We want to get ourselves in a position that we either prevent whatever we have going on from getting worse, or taking a truly proactive approach in maintaining our health so we never, or if ever, get to those places that are further down the line. And so what I'm seeing is really there's not enough time in doctor's appointments to really truly gain the education that we need. I think the recent statistic I read is the average PCP visit, a meeting with your general practitioner, is about 7 minutes face to face with your practitioner. That doesn't include having the nurse or the medical assistant come in and take your vitals. This is just actually the amount of face to face time you have with that provider. There's no way you can get all the information you need about what's potentially happening to you in those 7 minutes. So I sit in a position where I have new patient appointments that are 90 minutes. And a lot of it is just breaking down walls, because you need to gain rapport and have a relationship with your patient before they can truly trust, like, and know you and feel comfortable with the information that you're sharing with them, especially because this is potentially the first time they've ever heard it. So now it's like their brain has to really wrap around what you're telling them, but it also might run contrary to something that they've heard in the past. So now it's like an unlearning experience. So truly the best compliance from a patient is coming from their education. If they don't understand why they're taking either a medication or a supplement or doing something specific that you suggested to them, what is the merit in doing it? Because they just don't understand. And so that's why you have to take the time and educate them. After my first appointment, unless you're already coming to me on something, I'm not giving you anything else to take. I'm giving you basically information. So I'm giving you some handouts. I'm going over some of the things that we've maybe talked about in our meeting, because again, when there's a lot of information coming at you in a short period of time, it's going to be really hard to process all of it. So I don't necessarily expect questions right away unless they're coming to me at the top of their heads. But usually then I'll let them sit and marinate just with the information for 1 to 2 weeks. And then we'll have a phone call for anything that has come up in the meantime.
Interesting. So let's take a step back. For those of us who don't understand what is naturopathic medicine, how would you explain it to them?
Sure. So at the core, naturopathic medicine is really root cause medicine. The idea is that we're getting in on the ground floor and we're taking a very preventative and proactive approach. We work from this order of systems. It's called the therapeutic order, and it starts at the bottom with the least invasive therapies first, then working up to really high yield interventions. And what makes that a little bit different, if we consider those 6 principles in the therapeutic order like a pyramid, we kind of work with the bottom third, and then conventional medicine is really working at the top third. So those are things like surgery, high force like drugs, those types of things, really hard hitting drugs. And then at the bottom is really trying to work with the body's innate healing abilities, because truth in all of it, whether we believe it or not, we're always trying to find balance, whether we're trying to control it or give our body something to do. If you've been sick in an acute situation where you've had the cold, gotten the flu, or a sinus infection, if you sit with that for a few days with no intervention at all, with the exception of rest, drinking fluids, and eating the things that really nourish you, you're going to get better. And you didn't even need to take really anything to do that. Really, what we're doing is we're trying to work with the body instead of against the body, because a lot of the symptoms that we're experiencing are truly manifestations of what's happening as opposed to illness in and of itself. If that makes sense.
That does make sense. And that's so interesting because what you're talking about is essentially, in a way, listening to your own body and understanding what is happening with it and being proactive about it before things get to a state where 2 or 3 levels of intervention is needed, which is usually surgical or highly chemical doses, right?
Yeah.
What is it that is happening in our society right now? What do you think is happening that we're forgetting how to listen to our own bodies? And it seems like we've been doing that for hundreds of years.
Yeah, you're right. And it's something that I explore all of the time. And I talk with colleagues and friends and family about, because we've gotten to this place where now anytime we experience anything, whether it's a headache, a backache, etc., we're on the phone immediately, or we're in the emergency department because we need somebody else to tell us what's wrong with us, because we're not listening. The signals have gotten crossed somewhere. And I want to believe that has a lot to do with what we're experiencing as a society from a lot of the social programming. Look at the commercials that are on the TV. Like every other commercial is a pharmaceutical drug, right? That used to be never the case, but we have lobby groups that work at the highest abilities in politics that influence whether or not those things are put on the air. And then we have these situations where you go on Google, again, information overload, and you're just curious. And every now and again, I actually do that just to see what's going to come out in the search engine. And it's always the worst possibility. So here you are. How can you not expect to feel like you're dying? Because Google said that this is a real possibility. So now you're totally scared that you now have no choice but to call somebody else to either confirm your suspicions or to tell you otherwise.
That's so funny, but also sad and also true at the same time, because I've had personal experience with it. I bodybuild on the side, and there are sometimes pains or this or that I know exactly what is happening, why it's happening. But I will just for fun, I will go to ChatGPT and I'll just type in my symptoms and I say, what does ChatGPT say? And sometimes the stuff it spits out. If I was a hypochondriac, if I was somebody who was like really scared of this stuff, I would be freaking out. And no wonder consumerism that surrounds us, the commercials that you talked about of the pills and the potions, and the products that are out there to supposedly give us relief, they end up winning. And who ends up losing is the person and their own body.
Yeah, no, it's true, especially because the way that I'm able to give my patient the time is that I do operate a little bit out of the system, and I do take cash instead of health insurance, because health insurance would not allow me or compensate me in a way that would let me spend 90 minutes with you, right? But as far as as I see it, that should be your biggest investment, is what you're spending with me, not what you're spending on all of these things. And a lot of the times I have patients come to me, or I chat with them on a discovery call just to see how I can help them, or if I can help them, and maybe just pique their curiosity because they just don't know what it is I do or how I can help them, if at all. And a lot of the times I do hear people say, I've already spent thousands upon thousands of dollars, this supplement or that supplement, and now I'm just not in a financial place to be able to work with you. And that kind of breaks my heart too, because is there a lot of, I think we chatted earlier, is there a lot of things happening out there because there's really good marketing, there's really good gimmicky things. And especially when you hear your friend used something and it worked for them, you want to believe that it's going to work for you too, but that's just not the case. And so I think finding somebody off the jump, if you feel like optimizing your health or that something might be wrong, finding somebody that you're going to work with to point you in the right direction so that you're not really throwing money unnecessarily in these buckets, so to speak, is probably your best investment.
What is really interesting about how you approach care for your patients is through what would be like called sub process as opposed to an additive process. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think less is more. We live in a world where more seems to be more. And there was a lot of times, actually, I have a couple of patients right now where we seemed like we were hitting a wall. And I said, you know what? Let's take a break, stop everything unless it's 100% necessary. And let's just peel back the onion layers from there, because it's really hard to know what's having what kind of an effect when you're doing too many things. And that's true of medications too. Things are constantly interacting. And unless you're a pharmacist, you're not going to know that's the case, right? So the same is true when it's like supplements, foods, etc., activity, so on and so forth. So I have to say, one of my patients who I made that suggestion to, and we recently chatted, actually had a really positive effect to that intervention or lack thereof. And a lot of the times in a world where we are being told to take and do, I think sometimes we're doing it because I have to tell you, the relief on people's faces when they come into my office and I tell them I'm not sending them home with something else to do or take, I think that they're going to cry sometimes because they thought that they were going to walk into this where I'm going to tell them to do 100 things. That sometimes is more detrimental because now your brain is going, how am I going to schedule this, take this, do that, try to get this into my day to day. And I think then that runs counter to everything that we're trying to accomplish.
Not to mention, to your point, what you said earlier about the financial end of it. Every time you walk into a doctor's office, there's 20 blood tests that you need to do. There's 15 products you need to buy. And all of a sudden, you don't have any money left. And it's like a vicious cycle because then they can't afford to work with a doctor like yourself who's actually caring for their health. They're too busy just treading water to be able to just mitigate the symptoms over and over again, but never getting any relief.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's really happening in what we would call the integrative and functional medicine world, which is really running anti to the conventional medicine world. But they're almost two sides of the same coin. One is just taking a different approach where they're trying not to do medical or drug-related intervention. On the other side, that is and can have everything covered by insurance and it's minimal out of pocket. But when you go to a specialist in some cases, when you're going to like in a conventional realm, seeing an MD, you might be paying $50 every time for a copay. And if you're meeting with that person semi-regularly, that adds up too. Are we not taking that into consideration? And then you have on the other side, the functional doctors who are going to maybe put you on a slew of supplements. And for me, I want to find the middle ground because I think both systems are very overwhelming.
Creating something of your own based on your personal experience for the patients that you're really caring for. That's very interesting. Let's talk about two of the most deadly diseases that's plaguing America, right? And be it diabetes, maybe related to the heart, right? Diabetes is its all-time high, heart rate, heart risk because of diet and everything else going on. Pills and potions are by the wazoo, right? For our audience, if they are suffering from either of these two, what are some things that you recommend they can start out with as opposed to the conventional path where it's just sticking them with a needle right off the bat?
I think it's important to share that both of those diseases have common root cause in metabolic dysfunction. Metabolic meaning diseases of metabolism, which are influenced by the food that we consume. So immediately I have patients who are told by their doctors, oh, I'm pre-diabetic or what have you. And when I ask them what the intervention or what the advice is, they're often told, just lay off the sweets. And then there's no real guidance surrounding that. And some of these patients are happy to like not buy those things for a week, but if no one's following up or checking in with them, who's to say that it's not going to end up back in their cart? But also the education surrounding what is a sweet. Is it just the cakes and the donuts and the sugars and the sweets, things like that, right? No, then it's your side of things where you have the pastas and the rice, all things that in some circles are seemingly healthy foods or acceptable. We wouldn't really call them sweet per se. For me, it's breaking down what is a carbohydrate, what's the difference between the different types of carbohydrates, understanding our rhythm and our circadian rhythm, which is the sleep-wake cycle, and how that impacts how effectively you're going to process your carbohydrates from the day to night, because there's that synergism too, as well as knowing that how active are you? Because if you're a bodybuilder or a D1 athlete or working in the NFL or the Major League Baseball and these big like high time things where you're super active, you're going to benefit from regular carbohydrate intake. But the regular Joe or Sally who goes to work 9 to 5 every day and is trying to work in their gym schedule to what they already do, they don't need all this extra energy floating around. And that's where the common misconception is. Also, that fat is not something to be feared because I'm still dismissing that myth from the 90s.
Yeah, it's so interesting because we talked a little bit about the internet and the weird thing news it perpetuates. At one point, fat and we should avoid fat, but now carb is also the enemy, but then carb is also good. Discerning through all of this is hard. Let's talk a little bit about carbohydrates because it is such a big topic, especially with so many diets coming around in the last couple of years, the advent of keto, paleo, meat only diets. You talked about what is a carbohydrate and what are the types of carbohydrate. Can you go in a little bit deeper as to if I'm listening to this, I can understand what to eat and what to avoid?
Sure. So you have things like the cakes and the pastries and the donuts. Those are what we often call a simple carbohydrate. And that's because there's just, from a biochemical standpoint, it's just a very simple biochemical structure. That's the only reason what's there. But what that also means is that because it's so simple, it doesn't take as much to break it down, which means it's going to be rapid fuel for your cells. So if you are not very active and you go and eat a donut or cake, your sugar is going to spike immediately because you didn't do anything with it. It's not being taken up readily because you didn't just run a marathon or something. And then it's going to crash, come back down just as fast as it did go up. That's why it's simple, is because it's so easy to break down. Complex carbohydrates are things that are, from a molecular standpoint, have a lot more bonds. So it's harder to break them down. It takes a lot more energy to do that. So those are going to be things like your rice or your starches and your vegetables, because yes, vegetables have some carbohydrate in them, but they also have fiber in them. And so the fiber actually helps to buffer how much sugar or how quickly the sugar is going to be released into your bloodstream. And that's one of the primary differences I like to share with my patients and just audiences in general, is that's why I'm not a big fan of juicing, because juicing removes the sugar from the fiber. And so whereas when it was whole, that fruit or that vegetable, now it's purely sugar. So you took something that wasn't going to be rapidly released into the bloodstream, and now you've taken it and it's going to be immediately released, and it's going to act very similarly to like candy, honestly. So those are the big primary differences. And I do also like to say the way I like to rotate them or suggest to eat them in the diet is do carbs before a workout or some sort of endurance athletic performance, because the moment you start engaging your muscles and with activity, they're going to be the sugar that was just released from the food is going to be ready to go into your muscles to support the endurance and the strength training activity that you're doing, instead of hanging out in your bloodstream bloodstream and causing you to freak out and crash. And then what happens is when it doesn't get used, insulin, the hormone that processes blood sugar, takes anything left over and stores it as fat in your body. So it's almost like Goldilocks, where you need it just right, because if you're going to have too much, it's going to be bad. And then not enough is going to leave you, you're not going to have enough energy, right? And then after you work out, especially when it's strength training, I recommend more protein, because now the protein is going to serve as the building blocks to repair any muscle that occurred during your workout.
Very interesting. Very interesting. You talked about how heart disease and diabetes, they have some of the same roots. And we talked a little bit about carbohydrates and the blood sugar spikes and how insulin works into all of that. How is this tied to now heart disease?
So the number one killer in individuals with diabetes is heart disease. So basically, all of that extra sugar that's floating around in the body that's not being properly processed by the system that's gone awry is now going to create a very energy demanding system. It's almost like we're overfed, but we're undernourished. So when you have a very high blood sugar content, because that's all your body is constantly trying to get out of the bloodstream, it's not enough cells available to take it up for energy, or you don't need the energy, you're constantly in this state of on. So when you have too much sugar in the blood, that's signaling to insulin, hey, we need to remove you because we can't have you in the bloodstream. What happens is we're in a constant carbohydrate burning zone. We're never getting into burning fat, which we are always blaming high cholesterol for the cause of heart disease. And cholesterol is a type of a fat. While I don't totally subscribe to cholesterol being the cause of heart disease or heart attacks, I do agree with the fact that extra fat on our body is going to make a bigger person means more cardiac demand, right? So a smaller person doesn't have as much of a demand, larger body is going to. So that in and of itself is going to be problematic. But what I like to think of is that when we don't have the ability to remove all of that blood, all of the sugar that's floating around in the bloodstream, I like to think that sugar now starts to make holes in our arteries. And so what happens, we have some cholesterol that comes out and it works like spackle. So it's trying to repair what's happening that the sugar's causing at like these holes. So now think of a 10-lane highway that came down to a toll road. Now we're coming 10 lanes down to 3 lanes. Talk about a traffic jam. That's what's happening in your arteries when you're constantly putting spackle on these holes that are being ripped and torn into in the arteries. And that's going to, again, cause a big burden. Blood pressure is going to go up. Demand on the heart's going to go up. And then demand on the kidneys is also going to go up because that's one of the main regulators of blood pressure.
Very interesting. We talked about watching what to eat, also when to eat, and understanding some of these nuances that you laid out here. What are, if because naturopath is about preventative medicine, trying to make sure that we don't even get in the first place, are there anything else that you would recommend people watch out for on their journey, making sure that they don't end up even getting this in the first place?
I think part of it goes back to what we were saying earlier with listening to yourself and trying to have faith in your own ability to know what's your normal and what's not. And I think that's a big differential too, is that your normal is going to be different from my normal. So you might be fine with one circumstance that's not going to really work for me. And so there comes that like constantly checking in with yourself. Has my sleep changed? Because a lot of times that those small things that were never seemingly a problem before, now all of a sudden have become a problem, but we've ignored it because we're just so going on about our lives. So did my sleep change? Checking in with yourself like that. I even think now we live in a world of devices or like biometrics, like the way we can measure things. So I have an Oura Ring. A lot of people have Apple iWatches, right? I think it's a matter of educating yourself on even just using your device. You don't need a device, but a lot of people have them now, especially on your phone too. I think if you leave your iPhone on your bed, it can determine how often you're waking or sleeping. Most people have a phone anyway. Just seeing, are things different than they were even a couple of months ago, and really tuning into that, because you can go to the doctor, get your blood work, and it looks normal, but maybe you feel like crap. And it's oftentimes we see that little meme of the lady whose hair is all, she looked like she stuck her finger in an electrical outlet. And the doctor comes in and is reading the piece of paper and it's like, yeah, good news. All your labs look great. And she, oh, thank you. But she doesn't look like she feels like that. I think that's first and foremost is just checking in with yourself on a regular basis.
Makes sense. Let's talk about Soleil, your company, right?
Sure.
Obviously, we talked about one-on-one clinic, one-on-one ability for somebody to sit with you up to almost 90 minutes and be able to discuss in detail the problems they're facing, which is just not available through the regular conventional PCP service. But now you're also branching into the corporate world. What is this new initiative? Tell us about this.
So what that is, we now are taking this similar concept in the clinic and are approaching that into businesses, small, medium, and large, and running an audit of businesses, seeing what is employee satisfaction, how are most big companies are offering healthcare insurance benefits, but in theory, if that was solving the problem, we wouldn't have the rates of disease continue to go up and absenteeism wouldn't continue to go up. And so part of this is coming from employee satisfaction, making sure they're getting and taking care of their health, because if you have to go into work, you are spending a third of your day in the office. And so if you're going to spend that much amount of time in one place, you want to know that your employer cares about you and that you can feel supported in your health related decisions. So that looks like cooking for these companies to be able to show them that healthy food can taste good, because I'm constantly being met with that, going even just at family picnics. Oh, that's what? Oh, it's healthy. Oh, and oh goodness. So just trying to dispel like what healthy food is. And then when they're eating it and it tastes good to them and they know that it makes them feel good and will do good for them, we send them off with those recipes. And the premise behind it is it always has to be something pretty simple. It's not meant to be a 10-course meal. So it's something they can replicate when they go home, and we give that to them. We include seminars and talks during our lunches or our breakfasts or whatever it is that we're supplying for them. And again, back to the education piece that I said we are using in our one-to-ones. Now what I'm doing is I'm giving you education on health-related concerns that your industry or your employees feel like are an issue for them. So now they're going to be armed with the education. Since they're all receiving it at the same time, they're all now going to be able to talk to each other about it. And I think that's one of the things that's problematic is who's the outlier in their friend group? Like, who do they feel comfortable talking to about X, Y, and Z? And you get, oh, that's the healthy one. Oh, that's this one. Nobody wants to be labeled anything. So now you can create common ground for everybody in your company. If stress management is part of that, now we're giving you tangible techniques to be able to employ. And if you have meetings, because at our last corporate wellness event, that was one of the things that they mentioned. They're like, all right, at this week's team meeting, we want to do some form of a meditation or employ some sort of a technique that we learned during this training. So now you have everybody on the same page. And then we also offer breakout sessions. So maybe that's acupuncture in a group setting to calm down and relax. Maybe that's blending herbs or teas that can support certain things that you're looking for. And certain movements, we have one of our acupuncturists does Qigong and Tai Chi. So he will teach you moves that you in real life, really. You know, it's not abstract. It's not somebody else's concern that prompted him to come up. You expressing your actual concerns. And that's really what it is, making it very comprehensive. It's not just going and giving somebody a massage for the day. It's not just, which is again, in my opinion, a little bit of a reactive approach, right? You are tense from your job. Let's rub your muscles out, right? No, here, how can we actively calm our nervous systems down and employ things that are going to have immediate benefits for us as a whole?
I love it. I love it. Yeah. How do companies find you? How do they start working with you if this is something that they're interested in?
So we do have a page on our website for corporate wellness, and we do allow everybody to tailor what makes sense for them. So we do recommend semi-regular meetings, regardless of what it is you choose. So we do have lunch and learn. So we bring lunch to you, 60 minutes. We have a chat, a talk, workshop, some form of interactive thing. We recommend doing it at least quarterly, if not every couple of months, just to really synthesize the information. And then we also have evening workshops so that it's the same thing. Some people don't feel like there's enough time doing it for lunch. So let's spend a few hours after work, decompress, learn some, maybe make some mocktails, that kind of a thing. And then there's a weekend we workshop for 6 to 8 hours.
Three different options for whoever want to go in as much deep. I love it.
Exactly.
I love it. So your entire vision for Soleil right now with one-on-one wellness, moving into corporate wellness, it's all based on improving, enhancing the quality of life now, keeping in mind that what we are doing today is going to impact our future coming up. As opposed to conventional medicine, which is there's something wrong with you. Let's just try to fix it right now, like putting some duct tape on the Titanic that is trying to sink. What is in the vision for future for Soleil? What is the next step after that? Because you are taking this to a whole different level when it comes to preventative medicine.
So we want to actually, my cousin who partners with me, we're actually in the process of writing a grant for money to fund a different concept because we can only do so much as one or two people, right? And I do have 4 to 5 other providers in the office. But again, that's only 10 hands. And how much can you really do with that few resources? So the idea is that we want to create a network of providers who essentially subscribe to the same vision that we do. And we want it to be accessible to people. We want it accessible to patients who are looking for this, but just don't know how or where to search and find it. So we want to create this database. And then not only that, it allows it to be a database for patients or prospective patients to find these types of providers, but it allows us to have kind of this bank, if you will, of other providers to be able to pull from for these corporate wellness endeavors, because maybe we've already learned from one type of a provider and we don't need that for this group anymore. Or maybe we really need to tailor and niche something down and there's another provider in this subset that is really good at doing that. And at the end of the day, there's enough patients to go around that there doesn't need to be a competition. And I feel like that is also very true in alternative and integrative medicine.
In a world where everybody's trying to make even simple things seem complicated because complexity draws attention and money, you are doing the opposite. You're trying to go back to the roots of wellness, truly caring about the patient, stripping away all the things that are not needed just so that they can live a healthy, better life. At an individual level, and now moving into a corporate type of person you are, the personality you have, the mission that you're on speaks volume about what we think would happen to Soleil and its future. We, from Peak Performance Perspective, thank you so much for being on the show. It was an honor and a pleasure. Any final words that you want to say to the audience?
Advocate for yourself. If you feel like something sounds off, maybe that's the case, and just voice your opinion on it, because you are the one who has the power inside of you. And that's really what I hope everyone takes home from that.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.